Right, good morning everyone. Welcome to Thursday, the day before Friday. Just a quick mention, we've talked about a quiz on Monday, so I've put that information on Microsoft Teams in a little post so you can read it over. I think I have suggested that the quiz will cover classes 1 to 9, and so I'll make sure all of the lecture slides are up on student portal under course documents. I think 1 to 6 or 1 to 7 is there now, so I'll put the others up. Today is class 8, I think, so by the end of tomorrow we'll have all of those up and you'll be ready to go. Like I mentioned, if you're a student in Vancouver, you'll come in here and write the exam, or the quiz, sorry, but you'll come in at 9 instead of 8, because from 8 to 9 I'll be dealing with the online people, and online people will have a video call in Microsoft Teams and we can have a bit of a conversation, and yeah, we'll do it that way. Trust me, it will be fair. I will I will balance things. I know that, you know, an oral quiz is not the same as a written quiz, but again, I know that too, so I'll make sure that it's fair. Right, so we'll do that on Monday. And then after that, I think we should probably dive into the first paper topic and the first paper stuff, because as always happens, every term for me, the term goes by really quick, and I find out I'm behind, and I have to like start assigning stuff quickly at the end because we're running out of time. So I'd like to try and get a little bit of a head start on this stuff and assign the first one maybe next week. So we'll do the quiz. We'll talk a little bit about papers and arguments and things like that on maybe Tuesday or Wednesday, and then I'll assign you a paper topic and you can be off to the races, sort of thing. Okay, so we'll start that, and again, you'll have some time to write it. It won't be a 2-day thing. I'll give you an actual time frame to write it, but again, we'll talk about that next week. I just wanted to give you a little bit of advanced warning. Okay. Okay, let's say hi to people who are here. So Aza's here. Good morning, Aza. Amanpreet is here. Good morning to you. Sarah's here. Good morning, Sarah. Ryan is here. Good morning. Abby is here. Good morning to you, Abby. And Nicole is here. Good morning, Nicole. Shania is here. Hello, Shania. And Simrat is here. Good morning to you, Simrat. Okay, so yesterday we were talking about socialization, the process of systematically training people into understanding and following social norms, right? Very important. Humans have no operating system. We need to be socialized. And so as we absorb these social messages, either explicitly, so somebody just tells us what to do or what to think or what to feel, or we just absorb them implicitly, they become a lens through which we see the world, right? We start to see the world through these messages and interpret the things around us according to our cultural, sometimes all the words try to come out of your mouth at the same time and they just kind of make a mess. We start to interpret the world through our socialized messages, and that's important to understand for this course, okay? Right, the messages act as an unconscious filter, if you will. So yesterday we did a little exercise with some random people, right? 14 random people chosen from the internet. I didn't even choose them. Actually, the first time I did this exercise, I got students to find pictures of people from the internet, and so I just borrowed a few student pictures, and so I didn't even find these. These are just random people. But again, we asked some questions about who's the wealthiest, who reads the most, who's the most careful with money, who's the boss, right? Who feels excluded, who feels included? And we had a bunch of different ideas about you know, who might be described by these questions. And what I was trying to say is that our socialization allows us to make these interpretations, right? We know things about people, right? We know kind of what people are like. We know what old people are like. We know what young people are like. We can interpret maybe a little bit about someone's personality based on their clothing, right? Or the way they present themselves to the world, right? Are they smiling like number 7? Are they giving us a cool, confident look like number 1? Are they yelling at us like number 6, right? All of those tell us a little bit about maybe who that person is. And again, you know, we don't know for sure, but what I'm trying to say is that our brains are very good at taking the information that we have and trying to put together a picture of who people are or what they're like, right? And so based on that information, based on the socialization you've received, you were able to do that. Were you right? Were you wrong? Who knows, right? We would have to meet these people to know for sure. But your ability to do it is based on the social messaging that you've already absorbed. If you hadn't absorbed any messages about what people are like, this would be impossible, right? You wouldn't even be able to start this exercise. So the fact that we can make some guesses means that we have absorbed social messages about people and what they're like, right? And that's part of socialization, right? That's something that all of us go through. Right. Oh, right. So yesterday we were reading from the textbook, and I think we only had about 10 minutes for this. Can I give you just a few minutes to look over that again, and then we'll answer these questions? Maybe 5 or 6 minutes to look over again, refresh our memories. Can we do that? Hello? Anybody out there? Yes. We can do that? Okay, good. There's only a few of us in the room here, so if nobody says anything, it's weird. Okay. Take 5 minutes, look over it again, and then we'll talk, okay? Good morning.
Today?
Monday.
Have you ever received an orange in downtown?
Have I received an orange?
Yeah.
From whom?
He gave me the orange and told me don't get corona. He was giving to all people, like from fact, give us orange. I'm fighting corona. It's here.
Speaking of social messaging and knowing what people are like, do you think this was a person that you should have accepted fruit from?
Yeah, he was like looking like a gentleman. He was not walking like a homeless person.
In terms of social norms, is it a normal thing to just hand out fruit to people downtown? Is that a normal thing to do?
It was weird.
It is weird. It is weird. I usually like to avoid things that are weird that way. What's that?
I didn't reject his hand.
Okay.
Like, I accepted, but I don't eat it.
I don't know. I'm not sure I would eat it, but then I'm the suspicious type. They are difficult. That's okay. If it's easy, you're not really learning anything, right? Okay, good morning. All right, so maybe this isn't the easiest section, but that's okay because again, if it's easy, you're not really learning anything. So difficult stuff is good. So this section of the textbook is talking about why socialization matters, right? And we've talked about that a little bit already, why it matters. But what is peer group socialization? So socialization is the process of being sort of indoctrinated or taught society's norms. What's peer group socialization?
With people who are similar in age and social.
Yeah, your peers are your friends, the people around you who are kind of similar age and similar social status, right? People who are like you. So that's your peer group. And so we are socialized by them as well. And as the textbook kind of explains, when we're young, when we're little kids, the most important people who are socializing us is our family, right? Our parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and maybe siblings. Our family is the social institution, if you will, or the agent of socialization acting on us. But as we get older, our friends become more important to us, right? And so our peer group starts to socialize us as well, and we socialize them. Now, what do you think, though? Do you think the family is more important than peer group socialization, or do you think it's the other way around? The family? Yeah.
I think neither of them are like. I think both of them are the same.
About the same, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Daniel, why do you say the family is more important?
Because when you're a kid, you can learn better and faster.
That's true, right? When you're a kid, you tend to be learning a lot of things, and kids learn a lot very, very quickly, and their brains are primed for that sort of thing. So that's one premise, right? If we were saying if we were forming an argument for the family as a more important agent of socialization, one premise might be, well, kids learn a lot of things when they're quite young, and they learn them very fast. And so if they learn them from their family, it's very important, right? Nicholas, what do you think?
I think it depends, because for example, when you're a student, most of the time, most of the time you spend your time with your friends.
Yeah.
You only get to interact with your family in the morning or when you go home. So I feel like you'll have more influence from your friends
Hmm.
if you're a student. But if you're like he said, if you're a kid, then family socialization is definitely going to be more. That will have more influence on you.
Right. So that does depend, right? The stage of your life or your childhood that you're at. And of course, when you're young, you're spending a lot of time with your family. But then as you get older, you spend increasing amounts of time in school. And then sometimes when you're a little bit older, there's after school stuff. You hang out with your friends after school, or maybe you hang out with them in the evening. And so there's increasing amounts of time as you grow and as you get older that you're spending with your peer group and maybe not so much with your family. And so they might become more important in terms of socializing you into a set of norms, right? What else? Scotty, you thought it was kind of about the same?
Yeah.
Yeah? Why did you think that?
Well, we start off in the family, so I believe that it's the first place that we learn about things in life. And when we get older, when we start going to school, then we make friends, and we, as a group of people at the same age, I think it's a lot easier to understand how people do in societies.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I believe.
Yeah, that makes sense too, right? There's kind of a layering effect, if you will, right? You start out in the home and you sort of build a foundation of social norms, and then you go out into the world and you start learning new ones too, right? So there's kind of a complementary thing. Aza here says that, peer socialization refers to the way people learn or adapt in a group when they share similar interests and they socialize. Yep, okay. And she says here, I don't think peer socialization is as effective as family socialization because, one, it cannot be sanctioned in a peer group as they could be by their family. Ooh, that's an interesting point. So how are you sanctioned in your family by if you don't follow social norms or social rules? What do families do? How do they sanction you, positively or negatively? I know everything depends. Everything depends on something, but I mean, yeah. Right. So you might get the silent treatment. Right. There might be rewards that you normally get, or kind of things that you normally get that get cut off, right? Like money or allowances or something. What else? How else do families sanction you?
My parents would like just say,
That's it? Ooh, you get off easy. Just a little.
or maybe a
I'm not.
further drug at the end.
They don't give you the. I'm not angry. I'm disappointed.
No.
They don't give you that.
Always said, like, we have like a word in our language, father dog. My father told me, that means refers to him. Father dog. That's it.
Interesting. Azza says here you can get grounded. Right? What does it mean to be grounded? What's grounded?
It's basically like a jail. But
That's right. You're right. It's jail, but at home, right? You're not allowed to leave the house. Maybe you're not allowed to use your devices or use your computer. Maybe you're not allowed to talk to your friends. There's some sort of ending of privileges, right? Often going out. Yeah.
They can cast you out of the family.
Ooh, they could cast you out of the family, which would be a very severe sanction, would it not? You would have to do something pretty bad, I would hope anyway.
I mean, if you're in a strongly religious family and you came out as homosexual, they could, say you're not my son anymore.
Sure. So yeah, so very strong religious beliefs could cause someone to cast a family member out because they're not following a social norm, right, with regard to sexuality. So that's very sadly, that's something that has happened, right? And so, yeah, that could be a sanction as well.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is it common around the world now,
To do what?
to be outcast from your family? To be outcast? Cast out from your family?
Well, I think that's a cultural question, right? So, we saw the iceberg of culture. You remember that? And so every culture is going to have different ideas about what families are and how they should be organized and how they work. And so, like here in the West, we don't really have any sort of formalized idea about casting someone out of the family. I mean, some families have difficult relationships, right? Sometimes parents and kids don't speak to each other because they have some sort of ongoing issue. Sometimes siblings don't speak to each other because they have an ongoing issue. But there's not really a cultural precedent or a pattern for throwing someone out of a family for the most part. But again, Mulder's suggestion about maybe a child who was gay or lesbian being seen as being out of the family. Sadly, that kind of thing has happened. But again, there's no real pattern for that to happen here in the West. But does that happen in your home countries? Is there kind of a precedent for people being thrown out of their families?
Yeah, mainly there's like a subject that there's a whole around this area like sex, LGBTQ, gay, lesbian things, and they just don't know how to react.
Yeah,
Just don't know
sure.
I have a son. My son should go this path in his emotional life, in
Sure.
his sexual life.
Sure.
So they didn't thought about this thing that maybe this person, his son,
Mm-hmm.
her daughter,
Yeah.
anything goes no, I don't want to go that. This is not me. I want to go that.
Yeah.
And there's mainly because the religious thing, for what was the word, the people got shamed because his son get gay. The father get shamed in the whole city.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a.
Shames on himself.
Yeah. So, and there's a few things mixed up in there, right? The cultural ideas, right? There's a cultural idea about how much say should parents have over their child's life and decisions, right? And it sounds like from what you're describing, the parents actually do have some degree of control over their kids' lives, right? Whereas here in the West, it's kind of, for the most part, it's like a hands-off sort of thing, right? Like your parents shouldn't be telling you what to do when you're an adult, right? But again, that's a cultural value that differs, right? There's also that cultural idea of honor, right? And so that's what you're talking about. The family has a certain amount of honor, and they maintain that honor by following social and sometimes religious rules, right? By being good community members, right? Good people, and by kind of following the rules. And so when someone breaks the rules, right? If someone has a child who is gay or lesbian, or maybe is sort of having relationships prior to marriage that their culture says they're not allowed to have, then that can diminish the family's honor, right? And so it's not just the child, it's the entire family, right? And so sometimes the family will sanction that individual in order to preserve their or restore the honor of the family, right? So there's a few kind of cultural ideas tied up in that, right? And again, those are differing cultural values, right? Some cultures have that idea of honor, and some cultures have an idea where parents have a lot of say over their children's lives, and then other cultures don't really have that, right? And again, that's there's a historical basis for that, which we won't get into, but yeah, but those are.
Even some of my friends that like came here,
Mm-hmm.
I just know two girls from Iran. Like they came here, they were living here for 2 or 3 years.
Mhm.
They're nice girls. They can't tell their family
No.
because they know if they tell them, no support, nothing, abandoned.
Yeah.
Like I don't know you ever, never from his father and mother. Like remove his name from their like nation, sure.
Like official records or
Like
government
paper
records or something?
Or like a passport you have.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and yeah, so that's a pretty severe sanction, right? And again, here in the West, we don't really have any sort of pattern for that. Like there's not any kind of precedent. There's not any historical thing that's been done. Although, a parent could choose to just stop talking to their child. I mean, that happens. But it sounds like in Iran, it's a little more of a formal thing that has happened to people. In the West, kind of not so much. People just stop
And if
talking.
the government knows in the Iran, like you're homosexual,
Yeah.
gay, lesbian, they kill you.
Right, and so and that's a cultural or maybe more religious value as well, right? So, what about peer group socialization? How do and Abby says confiscating your gadgets too, so that's part of it. How do peer groups sanction you? How can peer groups sanction you?
By casting it out of their groups.
Right. So you can get kicked out of the friend group, right? If you have a circle of friends and
Or
then you.
decreasing their connection with you.
What's that?
It decrease their connection with you.
Yeah, they kind of, maybe they don't talk to you as much, or they stop calling you or texting you, or they stop inviting you out when, the friend group goes out to do something. Maybe you don't get the invite, right?
We do that ourselves.
What's that?
We do that ourselves. Like
Yeah.
when we see somebody do something that he or she shouldn't do,
Yeah.
like we do the same.
Yeah.
It's like a normal thing.
That's peer group socialization, right? You have a set of kind of common understandings or common rules about how people in the group should act, and when someone doesn't act that way, you sanction them, right? You kind of push them out a little bit, and maybe if they start following the rules, maybe they get back in, right? You bring them back in, but if they don't, they kind of get pushed out, right? And again, it sounds kind of cruel, but it's kind of natural human behavior to create a set of norms and then try to get each other to follow them, to follow the rules. It's kind of interesting, right? Because it almost, it strikes me, and if I'm wrong, say, Mike, you're wrong. But it's interesting how the family, I feel like they have the more powerful set of sanctions, right? Like being kicked out of your entire family is a very powerful sanction, right? Yet, when we kind of get into our teen years, suddenly it becomes the peer group whose sanctions are more important. Do you find that? Or they feel more powerful, even though like your family has some real power. It feels like the sanctions and the acceptance of the peer group become more important than that of the family, which is kind of interesting, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
I don't think so, but it's just, I think I have a bias to you because I don't have a lot of friends back then.
Yeah. So, and that's true too, right? Is your personal experience, like your your personal experience is going to color your opinion on this, right? So that's very true too. Mulder, what were you going to say?
Like, when you're a child and you really care about what your family think, but when you grow up to be a teenager, you kind of like take the love and care of your family for granted because you've already experienced it for so long.
Right. And there's almost this, barring being kicked out of the family, but you kind of assume this, well, you deep down, your family loves you, right? and that they'll, even if they're angry with you or upset with you, they'll come around, right? They'll come to accept what you want or how you dress or the people you're hanging out with or the things you're interested in. They'll come to accept it. They'll get over it because they love you, right? But peer groups are kind of more fickle, right? They may not love you quite the way that your family does. And so, yeah, if you break the rules, it's much easier to get kicked out of a friend group than it is to get kicked out of a family, right? At least I hope so. So,
Sorry, can I say something?
yeah.
Like, as
Scotty.
Scott said, his capability in observing friends, like observing attention, trading the good energy and thoughts with other people,
Mm-hmm.
are all the elements that have an impact in our experience.
Right.
When we have a life like this, like if you came here in a foreign country, having no friends, having no background,
Yeah.
no foundations,
Yeah.
you just lived your family all like 15, 16, 17 years of your work in your home country, you just abandoned it. No work with it, you can't do anything. You came here. You should start from zero. Then your friends become your family.
Right. Right. So there's a bit of a personal history component to this as well, right? Lots of you have come here, you've left your families behind in your home country, and of course I'm sure you talk all the time and FaceTime and things like that, but you are kind of on your own here, right, without your family. And so, your peer group becomes even more important because you need people here to attach to and rely on, right? And you can't rely on your family of origin quite so much as you did when you were at home, right? So, yeah, so the context matters as well, right? Are you going to school every day and hanging out with your peers and then you're coming home to your family, or are you not, right? And if you're not coming home to your family, then, you might attach and give more importance to that peer group as well, right? Yeah, interesting. Okay. Number 2 here is what are the social institutions that help to socialize people? Well, and maybe if I can take a step back from that, what is a social institution?
Sports institutions like football clubs,
Okay.
music clubs.
So an institution it's like a thing, right? It's like an abstract concept. And what does the institution do? Right. It socializes people. So all of these institutions socialize people, while at the same time kind of doing something else that society needs, right?
In the background, they learn the people this socialization.
Right. So the first social institution that you probably encounter is what?
School?
Even before that.
What was the name?
Huh? Childhood?
Childcare?
A childcare, yeah. Well, yeah, your family, right? The first social institution that you encounter is your family. Families are a social institution. They're a thing in society that accomplishes something that society needs, right? Society needs children to be raised and taken care of, right? Can't just have children wandering the streets aimlessly, right? They need to be taken care of. They need to be parented. And so the family serves that function of caring for and raising for children, or raising children, right? It also serves as a little unit of cooperation, right? Everybody in the family cooperates and helps each other out to live, right? To get shelter and food and love and care. The family kind of works that way as well. And it also socializes people, right? It socializes children. You mentioned education as another one, right? What's the purpose of education as a social institution? To educate people, right? To teach people the things that the government says they need to know to go out into society and live a productive life, right? That's what education is for. But what does education also do?
Makes you like have a better reaction when you enter another social groups, because you already get a whole idea of how other people live, say, react. Because you in a class in a school you see multiple types of people.
Yeah. So it's almost like, and I'm not sure how much this is true, but kind of the idea is that you're born into your family and you're socialized there, and then you enter a school, and the school is kind of like a mini society, if you will, right? It's a mini culture, right? And so the school has its own rules, right? The school has its own norms. There's all kinds of other people, different people running around that you will encounter and have to deal with. There's a boss, right? There's multiple bosses, and those bosses have other bosses above them. There are rules to follow. There are time schedules to follow. There's work to do. There is deadlines. There are things to balance, right? Our work and our extracurricular activities. Maybe there's some romantic interests if you're lucky. All of these things can kind of happen within the school, right? And so the school performs a function of, yes, teaching you the things you need to know to be a productive citizen and in the world of work and so on, but it's also an agent of socialization. It's teaching a lot of things about behavior in terms of how to get along with people in groups, how to be professional, quote unquote, how to manage your time, how to follow a schedule, how to listen to a boss that's not your parents, how to do all these things, right? And so there's a curriculum, right? There's things that we're teaching you, like math and science and social studies, and then there's a hidden curriculum. There's all these other things that you're being taught, not sometimes explicitly, but often implicitly, right? We are teaching you to be not only good citizens, but also good workers, right? People who can operate in the workplace because you're used to sitting at a desk and having a civil conversation and taking notes and keeping organized and following the schedule and keeping up with your work, hopefully. There's all these other things that are being transmitted to you at the same time. So it's not just math, right? It's not just math that you're learning. It's all kinds of other things that you're learning at the same time, just not in a formal way, right? There's not a class for teaching these things.
So can I say something?
Sure.
We had a teacher in our school.
Yep.
In 11th grade. He said the school is make you a good worker. University makes from you a good employee. But if you go for after the professional degrees, after that you're on your own, and that means you're on the next level. That means you entered a new era of experience, new era of the professionality in a specific subject. That means, okay, in this subject, this person reached the end of the road of the education.
Well, I think so. He said school makes you a good worker, and college or university makes you a good
Employee.
a good employee. Maybe. I think there's something to that in that, you know, once you you know, if you continue your learning, you know, past your university career, I'm kind of thinking almost like a PhD kind of person. You are kind of on your own because you know, as you leave university, if you become a graduate student, if you do your master's, you're definitely learning from other people, but you are definitely in the driver's seat of your learning, right? Teachers aren't telling you what to do anymore. You're telling yourself, right? You're figuring out what you need to learn. You're the one who's responsible for figuring out what you understand, what you don't, and you know, if you have to learn something, it's your job to learn it because you need to know it. And so I do kind of see that. I do kind of see that. But it is an open question. You know, we're talking about it in sociological terms, and we're answering the question, what is school for? Well, it's to educate its citizens and act as an agent of socialization. That's what schools are for. But there is a bigger question about what education is for as well, which we definitely don't have time to get into. But it's kind of an open question. What is education for? Are we doing it right? Could we be doing it better? What are we actually teaching students? What are they getting from this? Are we doing the best we can for them? Yeah, there's lots. Those are all open questions, and there's lots of them. And so I can kind of, good morning, I can kind of see, I can see where your teacher is coming from, and absolutely. He sounds like a smart guy. Right, so other social institutions, we have schools, we have family, we have the media is a social institution. The government is a social institution. The criminal justice system is a social institution. The military is a social institution, or law enforcement, you could say, is a social institution. All of these are kind of little bits of society, and they all kind of work in order to keep society running, right? Do you think society would work really well if suddenly families didn't exist? No, right? There'd be no way to raise kids. Nobody would be responsible for kids. It would be chaos, right? The family serves a very important role. If we ended education tomorrow, would society be okay?
No.
No, it'd be chaos, right? If we decided we don't need law enforcement anymore, good idea? Never a good idea, right? And I know, I know there's a lot of, you know, there was a few months ago, there was a lot of talk about defund the police and stuff like that, and that's kind of another thing. But it's probably not a good idea to end law enforcement, right? We still need police, right? We still need people to protect us. We still need maybe a military to protect us, although Canada's military is so small, it's not protecting us from anything really, but
itself is protected by like England.
we are, in theory, we are more protected by the US. We're an ally of the US, and we share a long border with the US. So even if the US didn't really care about us, they would probably defend us to defend themselves, or at least that's what we're counting on anyway. But yeah, sorry, Scotty?
Education is so important, yet a lot of people hate it. Why?
Yeah, education is so important, but a lot of people hate it. Why?
Because there is so much path, like so much effects that may this education have for that person.
Okay,
Maybe this person have a goal in his mind.
sure.
His future. The education that he chooses or she, maybe she or he made the wrong choice about that education and shouldn't take that path. I mean, choosing the path have a very great impact on that achieving that goal.
Sure.
So in order like achieving that goal, maybe this person shouldn't take this educational way to reach that point.
Right.
Should analyze his goal, analyze his way, analyze his goals, his capability, talents, like his financial financial problems, everything, because they are a reality. There are elements that we have and all the sources we have, and we should like reach to that goal with this little financial and time we have.
Right. So I guess there's, just to summarize for people online, I guess the idea is that, sometimes if we have a goal in mind or a place we want to get to in our lives, sometimes it can seem like I just want to get there, right? I want to make the choices. I know what I need to do, yet I have to do this education here that is required, and it feels like a waste of time, right? It feels like I could be doing the thing I want to do, but instead I'm stuck doing this thing that I don't want to do, that the government says I have to, right? So yeah, sometimes school can seem, the courses or the things you have to do can be kind of, it can feel like a waste, right? It can feel like it's getting in the way of what you really want to do. What else? Why do people dislike school?
Without diploma, you're like a savage to the other people. Like you just do nothing.
Sure. Yeah. There's a bit of pressure there as well, but there's a requirement for, like, if you don't have a high school diploma, that's going to be a problem for you, right? Unfortunately. And even if you don't have some sort of college education or trade-based skills education or a university degree, if all you have is that high school diploma, that's not going to work very well for you either, right? You've got, and that's where you will be, right? You'll be doing something that's kind of very simple or very manual work, and that can be tough because you rely on your body, and if your body doesn't hold up, right? If you get injured or if you get sick, then you can't make money and you're in trouble, right? What else? Why do people not like school so much?
Is it repetitive?
Okay, so there's a certain stress attached to grades and things, right? It's competitive, and there's always this, I guess, pressure to achieve whatever mark you need or want to achieve, right?
Yes, but I think, what about repetitive?
What about it? Like, what are you thinking about that?
Are schools repetitive?
Are schools repetitive? Well, I guess they can be. What do you guys think? Are schools repetitive?
You go to school 5 days a week and you do the same thing every day?
I guess in some ways it is, like you come here 5 days a week, your classes, you go to the same classes every day, you sit in class every day, and we talk about one subject, different aspects of one subject, but one subject. So yeah, I guess, after a while it can feel like the same thing over and over, I guess. Why else? Why else do people not like school? Or do you like school? You like school? I will confess to you, I hated school. Man, it was the worst. I had a few years that were okay.
Teacher or student?
What's that?
Teacher or student?
Say that one more time.
You're a teacher, what in school?
Yeah, I'm a teacher now, but I was a student before and was a terrible student. And I was not into school, I was not interested in what was going on, and strangely, I really only started to like school once I went to university. And I had a little more choice about what to study, and I had to take classes that I wasn't interested in, of course, but I took a lot that I was interested in, and I did better there. But yeah, I hated school pretty much all the way through. From
Do you like your job now?
Do I like my job? Yeah, I love my job. I wouldn't trade it. But it's kind of ironic, yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Because I was the worst student. But I definitely could have made my life a lot easier had I been able to be a good student at the time. Like it would have been better for me if I could have done that, but I guess at the time I couldn't. So But,
No regrets.
huh?
No regrets.
Well, I could regret it, but it doesn't make much of a difference now. I can't go back and change it. But yeah, lots of my teachers, I think if they knew I was a teacher now, they'd probably faint. But that's okay. Let's see. Okay, so last question. Okay, let's take a break here. Let's take a break. We'll come back and we'll talk about number 3. Okay, so 10-minute break, then we'll do number 3, and then we'll go on. Okay. And we're back. So we've just talked about peer group socialization, the ways in which we're socialized by people of our kind of own age and the people we kind of hang around with. We said that there's lots of different social institutions in society: the family, marriage, the media, the government, law enforcement. What am I missing? Criminal justice. All of those things are social institutions, and they serve a function in society. They do something for society as a whole, but they also socialize people in the process, right? So the third question here is, do you think that your schooling in the past had a hidden curriculum? Do you think that that was the case? Do you think you were being taught things indirectly? Do you think there were beliefs and values and social norms that were passed on to you through the process of school?
I think they definitely tried to make us more competitive, but no one really cared.
Oh, that's true. Certain schools in kind of certain parts of the world, as far as I'm aware, there's a much stronger feeling of competition, right? Competition between students, and so there's a lot of attention paid to who's the top student and who's the second student and where you are on.
I was.
Yeah, where you were the top student.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a lot of attention paid to that, right? And teachers and schools and parents put a lot of attention and pressure on figuring out, who's the best and who's the second and who's the third. And then, of course, pressuring and pushing students to score as high as they can, right? But there's a cultural difference in terms of the school culture and kind of the culture that surrounds it, right? Here in the West, it's not quite so competitive. Quite honestly, I don't care who the best student in this class is. I want you all to do well. Well, it's obvious. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I want you all to do well. I want you all to succeed in your goals. But I don't care who gets the highest mark in here. That's the least interesting thing to me. But, that's not true of all schools, right? Some schools are very interested in who's the top gun, right? Who's the best. Do you think those hidden curriculums are good things or bad things? I'm gonna jump to Aza here because she wrote. She says yes, she believes it's good because it helps us know. I'm just gonna pull this up here. How we're supposed to behave, and at times, even without noticing, we pick up a lot of knowledge through hidden curriculum. Yeah, there's a lot of things that are taught to us at school that, again, we're not really necessarily aware of, right, Scotty? Yeah? Yeah, there's a lot of things happening at school that we're not necessarily aware of. And so, and some of those things are good, right? Because schools try to make kids into good people, right? They try to teach them good values and good behavior. Schools are not perfect, of course. Sometimes they make mistakes, but, sometimes they fail to teach what they're trying to teach, but their intents are usually good, right? There's a lot of pressure to figure out who's the first best student and second best and third best, and I'm not sure I believe that I don't think that's a good thing to do, really, but the intent is to encourage students to do their very best, right, and to try to be on top. Again, I think the effects of it are not what a school would want, at least in my opinion, but other people have other ideas about that. What else do you think? Hidden curriculums, good or bad? They're good, but
If you, for example, because in school or in mostly or parenting, everything is human operated. So every goal is like expected or idealized, like to reach that point.
Mhm.
Because everything is human operated, there are some parts that like they didn't pay thought about it, like they don't know if it's happened anymore. So
Yeah.
that's an area that's unexpected.
Yeah, schools, and we could probably say this of all social institutions, they are not perfect, right? Their aims and intents, their intentions might be good, might be honorable, but social institutions are made up of human beings, right? And one thing we know about human beings is that they tend to screw things up sometimes, right? They don't do a good job, they forget about something, they pay attention to the wrong thing, they think they're doing one thing, but the effect is something else. And yeah, it's always the case, right? Humans are not ideal creatures, they're not perfect. They make mistakes and they do things wrong sometimes, right? So yeah, social institutions and hidden curriculums can have, you know, they can have a different effect from what they're trying to do. Yeah, sure.
Does hidden curriculum refer to what the school teach you, or what like the social institution in general teach you? Like, is interacting with students and learning how to interact with people a hidden curriculum?
I think you could say that basically anything that you are kind of learning from school, or anything that the school is teaching you that is not part of the real curriculum, like math and stuff like that. Anything that the school is teaching you is hidden curriculum. And there's a lot, right? There's a lot of things that school teaches you outside of reading and math and things like that, right? Yeah, and again, you know, some of those things are good, and maybe some of them are misguided, or, you know, I will say right now that I think, you know, that intense pressure, that intense competitive pressure, I'm not sure that it's good for students. You know, I think it's detrimental to their mental health. A little bit of pushing is okay, right? You want them to, you know, you want your students to buckle down and do their work and succeed, but excessive pressure is, you know, it can be damaging for some students, right? Especially if, you know, you're not at the top, and, you know, how many students can be the best student in a school? One, right? So it's really only good for one student, and even then it might be bad for their mental health as well. Not to mention the few hundred others that are never going to be number one, because there can only be number one. So again, I don't know that it doesn't really align with my values and what I think education should be and is for, but I know there's different perspectives.
Resources have a really great role in this subject.
What's that?
Talents and sources.
Talent and sources?
Yes.
What do you mean by sources?
For example, let's compare two students. One student have very good financial position. When he is home, he don't have any worries about nothing. He just can focus on his study. He attracted to the study. But in the other hand, if a student has like financial problem, not so good, not so bad, but still have problems. So this person at least have two other things to think about compared to that person. So that student don't attract him to the study. He pushes himself to study.
Well, it's very true. I think it's very true that, yeah, there's a lot of factors involved in, you know, in how a student does in school, right? And, you know, it can have to do with just their brain power, right? Their brain's ability to do complex things, but it also has to do with focus, and it has to do with, you know, mental health issues that students might be experiencing. It has to do with their home life, right? Is their home life nice and stable and peaceful, and you know, everything's okay in the family, or is it chaotic and there's all kinds of crazy things happening at home that is distracting for them? Do they come from a high socioeconomic status family or a low one, right? The kids from poor families tend not to do as well in school, and the kids from wealthier families, they tend to do much better, right? That's clearly evident, and it shouldn't be that way, but it is. So Again, there's a lot of things, that number one student might be in the number one spot, but there's a lot of different variables and factors involved in that. It's not just.
Can I say example?
Sure.
Like, for example, two students are failing a subject, a study. But the, like, not good one, like, from financial view, he can't, like, afford to get a private teacher,
Mm-hmm.
but only for his class. So he should work, like, 3 times, 2 times, 4 times more than that student who gets a private teacher, resources,
and that's one of the ways that wealthier families are able to ensure better educational outcomes for their kids, right? They have the resources. And so, like in the United States, when they closed down schools months ago and everyone went home, wealthy families just hired private tutors, right? Or even teachers. They got a few neighborhood kids together, maybe 3, and they hired a teacher to teach their kids, right? Can poor families do that? No, their kids sat at home and watched TV. So who comes out ahead, right? Wealthier families.
money makes money.
Yeah, exactly. Wealthier families are able to provide those supports, right? Tutoring, or if it's a pandemic, they can get teachers to teach them in person. Poor families don't have that option, right? And again, I think in a society, if you're interested in equality, you want to make sure that educational outcomes aren't connected to how much money you have. But unfortunately, that's the pattern that we often see, right? Is that parents with money can ensure that their kids have more educational support.
I live in Westland. I was like, I see what was the atmosphere at the Westland, at the parties, at the gatherings. The rich people, after the pandemic, became 2 times or maybe 3 times more richer. But when I went to the Surrey, the homeless people get twice or even triples.
Yeah, and that's true as well, unfortunately, right? People with money have opportunities and can do things that poor people cannot. One of the things, we're getting off track here, but one of the easy ways to notice this is, does anyone go to Costco?
Yes.
Yeah? Yeah. And why do you shop at Costco? It's cheap, right? It's you get good deals, right? But what's the problem with shopping at Costco? How do you get those deals? Memberships. So there's a $60 yearly membership.
Is like 90.
Yeah, there's 2 types, but at least $60 you've got to pay for membership.
The other form is 125.
Okay, so membership fee, and what's the other thing about Costco? You got to buy a lot, right? So you can't just buy 2 rolls of toilet paper. You've got to buy 48 rolls of toilet paper, enough for the next year, right? You've got to buy in bulk. You've got to buy big quantities. Do people that don't have a lot of money, can they do that? No, they can't. They can't afford to buy 48 rolls of toilet paper at once. If they could, they would save money, but they can't. And so what do? They go to Shoppers Drug Mart and buy 4 rolls of toilet paper and pay way more than you do at Costco. And so it would be great if people with less money could save money, but in fact they can't because they need money in order to save it, right? Yeah, so, and again, that's one tiny example, but yeah, there are ways that people with money and resources are benefited because they can use their money to either make more money or to save money in ways that people who don't have money can't do it. But we'll get to that. That's later. Okay. Let me see. What's next? Okay. So, so actually this is connected. This is good. So the social messages and the cultural information that we internalize has a great deal to do with our positionality, right? So the things that we think are important, the things that we think are right and wrong and good and bad, and things we should do and things we shouldn't do, all of those things are connected to our social positioning, right? So our gender has a lot to do with that, right? Boys and girls are socialized differently, right? In basically every culture around the world, being brought up as a little boy by your parents or whoever is different than being brought up as a little girl, right? We have different gender roles, we have different gender expectations, and so we socialize these two genders differently, right? Sexuality has a lot to do with it as well, particularly if your sexuality is not in alignment with what society says is okay, right? If you're a straight person, fantastic, right? But if you're gay or lesbian or bisexual or pansexual or something else, then you're going to interpret society differently, and you're going to absorb social messages differently, right? Same thing with ethnicities and religions, economic class, right? So the economic class that you belong to will have a lot to do with what social messages you absorb. Yeah, so again, your positionality influences how society treats you. It influences how you experience society, and it influences the kind of social messages that you absorb, right? Yeah, that's what I meant to say. So, okay, I said that already. So this is what we're going to do tomorrow. We're not going to start this today, but tomorrow we're going to start a movie. So if you want to bring popcorn tomorrow's your popcorn day, Cheyenne.
Sorry?
Tomorrow's your popcorn day.
Oh, Mean Girls. Oh.
Do we watch it for the entire lesson?
Yes, so we'll watch the entire movie. It'll probably take us to Friday and maybe Monday's, the other half of Monday's class too. Maybe Tuesday. What's that?
1/3 of the film will left.
Yeah, it'll take us a couple days to watch it at least. So this is a film that came out in 2004, so it's a little bit old, but it still feels pretty current. It feels pretty timeless. Takes place in a high school, okay? And so it's kind of a fun movie. Most classes seem to have enjoyed it and thought it was kind of funny. It has a good message, particularly for young women. But it's also a great movie for demonstrating the power of socialization and how social norms are created and enforced. It'll show us a little bit of social stratification and how kind of social groups interact. And so why I want to watch this is because I think I just mentioned that schools are kind of like a little mini culture, right? They're like a little mini society, if you will. And so it'll be interesting to watch this movie and think about how this little school society works, right? How do the social groups interact? How are social norms created? How are they enforced? Who has power? Where does that power come from? Why do they have power in the first place? We'll get to see all of these things kind of happen in kind of a, not on a society-wide context, but in just a smaller context. And it's entertaining at the same time, right? So there's a little bit of both. But every time I watch this movie, I'm kind of amazed at, the fact that people like this movie. It's a popular movie. Again, it's got a good message and it's funny and it's well written and all of that stuff. But there's a lot of stuff in it. There's a lot of good, interesting sociological things happening and psychological things, but it's not a psychology class, so we won't deal with the psychology. But we will deal with the sociology of how this little school society operates, okay? And so what's going to happen here, I'll set it up tomorrow, but I'll set it up today because I'm not going to, we won't start watching it today because we don't really have enough time, but I'll just describe it. So the premise for this movie here is that this young girl, she's 16 or 17 years old, something like this. Her name's Katie Heron, played by Lindsay Lohan, and she comes to a school in the United States, a high school in the United States from Africa. So her parents are biologists working in Africa. She's been living with them for 16 years. They have educated her, they have homeschooled her, and then they move to the United States and Katie is dropped into an American high school. And so she quickly kind of has to figure out a lot of social rules and social norms that she knows nothing about. And Mulder's like shaking his head like, yeah, you're having a flashback to something else?
Let's move on.
Very well. So the movie is kind of her experience of being dropped into a society in which she hasn't been socialized, right? She doesn't know the rules, she doesn't know the norms, and so her experience is very much, the process of trying to make friends, and she's interested in a boy and all that kind of stuff. But there's also her trying to figure out how society operates, and so again, this movie works on a bunch of different levels, and so it's a good one to watch for this class. So we'll start that tomorrow. Azza says, could you tell us more about the quiz on Monday, please? Yes. So Azza, for you, what it will look like is first thing in the morning on Monday morning, in Microsoft Teams, I'll type a little message and I'll say, hey, good morning, we'll start the quiz in a few minutes. Let me know who's here. And so you and a bunch of other people will reply to that message, and that's kind of the order that I will call you in. And I'll call you through Microsoft Teams, and then once we manage to connect, I'll say, okay, tell me what you know about socialization, right? And you will explain what you know about it to me, and I'll say, okay, good, and maybe I'll ask a follow-up question, or maybe I'll ask a different question, and I'll just kind of listen to what you say, and I'll grade you based on your answer. That's kind of how it will go. And then, so those quizzes will take place from about 8 to 9, and then online people, you'll be free. You can go and do whatever you want. And then the in-class people will come in here at 9 o'clock. They'll sit down and they'll write a paper version with written questions. And some of them may be the same as the ones I ask you online. Some of them might be different. Who knows? But that's kind of that's how it'll go. The questions will be short answer, and so I'll ask you a question and you'll answer it with a few sentences maybe, or you'll have to name 3 things and you might point form them or something. That's kind of what it will be like. Does that work for you, Azza? Does that sound okay, or did that answer your query? Yeah, so that's how that'll go. So tomorrow, which is Friday, come on in. We'll set up Mean Girls. I have some questions. I have some questions on Mean Girls. Okay, you're welcome, Azza. No problem. I have some questions for Mean Girls, so I'm just going to post them in Microsoft Teams now, so I don't forget. So they are there, but don't worry about them. Don't worry about them right now. We'll deal with them tomorrow. Okay. So I have a set of questions that I want to ask, and those questions are meant to pull out of Mean Girls the stuff we want to talk about, right? So that said, I think I will leave it there for today because I don't want to start watching the movie because we've only got a few minutes left and it'll take us a few minutes to get it set up. So I will end class there today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your participation and your thoughtful comments. I look forward to more of them tomorrow and next week. And that's it. So I'll see you all tomorrow. Goodbye. Have a nice afternoon.